Splat! The sound of frosting and sponge echoed louder than the orchestra's strings. Gasps rippled through the golden-lit ballroom as the three-tiered cake, lavender, cream, and silver-dusted, exploded across the face and gown of a black woman who had been standing quietly by the champagne fountain. Dozens of eyes turned, wide with disbelief. Crystal glasses froze mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Cameras flashed, not for the event anymore, but for the scandal unfolding in real time. At the center of it all stood Vivian Lancaster, the 26-year-old heiress of the Lancaster fortune, her manicured hand still dripping with frosting. She smirked, her pearl necklace gleaming as though mocking the woman she had just humiliated. "Oh, darling," Vivian purred loud enough for half the room to hear. "You should know your place. These galas aren't for people like you." The black woman, Eleanor Brooks, did not flinch. Frosting slid slowly down her cheeks, pooling at the neckline of her sapphire dress. The crowd expected her to cry, to lash out, to crumble under the humiliation. But she didn't. She simply reached for a napkin, dabbed her face calmly, and looked Vivian straight in the eye. It was that unshaken gaze, poised, steady, commanding, that made Vivian's smirk falter for the briefest second. But before anyone could speak, laughter erupted from Vivian's clique of wealthy friends, breaking the tension. "She looks better this way," one sneered. "Someone take her to the kitchen. She belongs with the staff." The cruelty hung in the air like poison, yet no one dared to intervene. The gala was packed with CEOs, politicians, heirs, and media moguls. Every person weighed down by their titles, their fortunes, their fear of losing access to the Lancaster empire. No one wanted to be the one to cross Vivian, except Elena. She folded the napkin neatly, placed it on the table beside her, and spoke in a voice that carried effortlessly across the ballroom. "Interesting," she said softly, almost too softly, but the room was so silent that every syllable rang clear. "You just destroyed more than cake tonight, Miss Lancaster." Vivian scoffed, rolling her eyes, but that flicker of unease returned to her expression. She didn't realize it yet, but Elena Brooks was not just another guest. She was the quiet force behind one of the largest investment firms in the country, and she was here for one reason only: to finalize a $4 billion merger with the Lancaster Group. Now, the deal hung by a thread. Just hours earlier, the Lancaster family gala had been the talk of the city, a dazzling spectacle at the Grand Clarendon Hotel, where chandeliers dripped crystals like falling stars, violins painted the air with symphonies, and champagne flowed like rivers of gold. The purpose of the gala wasn't just charity or celebration, it was business. Behind the glittering gowns and tuxedos, the evening was meant to seal partnerships, strengthen alliances, and most importantly, finalize the massive 4B agreement between Lancaster Industries and Brooks Capital. It was a deal that would dominate headlines, shift markets, and consolidate the Lancaster family's influence for generations. Everyone in the ballroom knew Elena Brooks was the linchpin. Without her signature, the agreement was nothing but paper. She was one of the most respected financial minds of her time, sharp, strategic, and notoriously unshaken under pressure. But Vivian Lancaster had never cared for business. She was an heiress raised in silk and gold, accustomed to a world where her whims carried more weight than contracts. To her, Elena wasn't a partner, she was an inconvenience. A presence that threatened Vivian's delicate ego simply by existing in a space Vivian believed belonged to her bloodline alone. And so, when she saw Elena standing poised by the fountain, admired by others for her grace, Vivian's jealousy had boiled into cruelty. The cake incident hadn't been a slip of temper. It had been a calculated show of dominance. Vivian wanted Elena small, humiliated, powerless, but she didn't know who she was dealing with. Elena had faced worse than cakes and insults in her life. She had fought through boardrooms where men twice her age sneered at her ideas. She had endured whispers questioning her legitimacy, her intelligence, her very right to exist at the table. Each battle had sharpened her into steel, so now, with the weight of an entire ballroom watching, Elena didn't shrink. She didn't plead. She didn't even raise her voice. Instead, she smiled. A calm, deliberate smile. And in that moment, those who knew her best, those who had seen that smile in negotiations before, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Because Elena Brooks never smiled unless she already knew she had won. What no one in that ballroom realized was that the real power that night wasn't sitting in the Lancaster name, the chandeliers or the billions in stocks. The real power was standing with frosting on her gown and dignity intact. And Elena Brooks was about to show everyone, especially Vivian, that when you try to humiliate the wrong woman, you risk destroying yourself instead. The ballroom was still. For a moment it seemed even the chandeliers had stopped shimmering, their crystals frozen mid-glitter as the weight of Elena's words lingered. Vivian, still clutching her champagne flute, scoffed again, louder this time, desperate to recover control. "Oh, please," she said, flicking frosting off her wrist as though the incident were trivial. "Don't be dramatic. It's just cake." But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Elena, graceful despite the ruin of her gown, slowly turned away from Vivian. She didn't argue. She didn't protest. Instead, she picked up her glass of water and walked calmly toward the center of the ballroom floor. Heads followed her every step, whispers snaking through the air like smoke. People weren't just watching her, they were waiting. Waiting to see if she would storm out, cry, or make a scene. But Elena did none of that. She stood beneath the chandelier, its golden light catching the frosting still streaked across her dress, and raised her glass slightly, not in toast but in poise. When she spoke, her voice was clear, steady. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "this evening was meant to celebrate the future, to build bridges, to honor commitments." She paused, letting the silence swell. "But what we've witnessed tonight is something else entirely." Gasps, murmurs. The guests leaned forward, riveted. Vivian's father, Charles Lancaster, the patriarch of the empire, shifted uncomfortably in his seat near the stage. He had built his fortune on power plays and negotiations, but he knew this was no ordinary business spat. He could see the steel in Elena's eyes, and for the first time that evening, he felt the fragile balance of billions tilt precariously. "Respect," Elena continued, scanning the crowd, "is the true currency in any partnership. Without it, no agreement, no matter how large, can stand. And tonight—" She turned her gaze back to Vivian, whose smirk was now gone. "Respect has been broken." The words hit harder than the cake ever could. The crowd erupted into hushed conversation. Some avoided Vivian's eyes. Others dared to glance at Charles, gauging his reaction. This wasn't just drama anymore. This was business unraveling in real time. Vivian, her face flushed, tried to laugh it off. "Oh, come on. You can't seriously be—" But Elena didn't acknowledge her. She set her glass down on the nearest table, her movements deliberate, controlled, like a general commanding a battlefield. Then she pulled a sleek black folder from her clutch. It was the agreement. $4 billion. Decades of projected profits. Entire networks of influence, all bound together in neat pages that, in Elena's hand, seemed suddenly weightless. The room held its breath. Elena opened the folder, glanced briefly at the contract, then closed it with a snap. "Tonight was meant to confirm this deal," she said. "But as of this moment—" She placed the folder flat on the table, sliding it away from her. "Oh, I am reconsidering everything." The words detonated. Gasps shot through the crowd, sharp as gunfire. The orchestra faltered into silence. Even the staff, waiters, bartenders, attendants, froze mid-step, their trays trembling. Vivian's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble floor. "What?" she shrieked, her voice cracking under the weight of panic. "You can't just— this is billions." My father, Charles Lancaster, was already on his feet, his face dark with rage. "Vivian, enough!" His voice was gravel and thunder, and the heiress fell silent instantly, though tears of humiliation pricked her eyes. He turned to Eleanor, smoothing his tie, his expression shifting into something carefully controlled. "Miss Brooks," he began, his tone suddenly humble, almost pleading, "this unfortunate incident does not reflect Lancaster Industries. My daughter's behavior was inexcusable. Allow me to extend our deepest apologies." But Eleanor raised a hand, cutting him off without raising her voice. The gesture was small, but in that charged atmosphere it was seismic. No apology, she said quietly, can erase what was done. Not to me personally, but to the values we claim to represent in these halls. The ballroom seemed to shrink around them. Charles opened his mouth to protest, but Elena continued, her tone unwavering. Your company sought to merge with mine on the foundation of trust, equality, and respect. Tonight, in front of the world's eyes, your own heir has shattered that foundation. She let the silence hang. And I do not build on broken ground. The weight of her words pressed down on every chest in that room. People shifted uncomfortably, aware they were witnessing not just a social scandal, but the potential collapse of a billion-dollar empire. Vivian's face twisted with desperation. You can't! You wouldn't dare! This is business, not— But Elena's eyes locked on her, cold and resolute. Business, she said, is exactly why I dare. The whispers grew louder now, threads of shock weaving through the elite. Some murmured about stock prices. Others whispered about headlines that would hit the news before the gala even ended. Phones buzzed discreetly under tables as frantic texts shot across the city. And Vivian Lancaster, once untouchable, once smug, stood trembling in the center of it all. Cake still staining her diamond-studded gown, her power unraveling faster than she could grasp it. But Elena wasn't finished. She reached for the microphone near the orchestra's stage. The conductor, unsure what else to do, handed it to her, her voice, amplified now, carried like a verdict. Tonight you all witnessed something vile. A moment where privilege was used not as a blessing, but as a weapon. You saw cruelty. You saw arrogance. And let me be clear, I do not tolerate it. Not in my life. Not in my business. The crowd erupted into applause, not thunderous, not yet, but scattered, uncertain claps from those brave enough to show where they stood. Then more, until the sound swelled like a tide crashing against the walls of the ballroom. Vivian looked around wildly, betrayed by the very guests who had laughed with her minutes earlier. And Charles Lancaster sat down. His face, grey and weary, said it all. He knew the deal was slipping through his fingers. But Elena's story wasn't finished. She had exposed Vivian. She had shaken the empire. Now came the part that would change everything. Not just for her, but for everyone who thought humiliation was power. Because Elena Brooks hadn't come here simply to sign papers. She had come here with a plan, and now she was ready to use it. The ballroom felt like a courtroom now, the glittering chandeliers above serving as harsh spotlights instead of elegant decor. Guests who had once clinked champagne glasses now sat stiffly in their seats, caught between horror and awe. The heiress, Vivian Lancaster, was pale beneath her foundation, her once sparkling gown sticky with frosting and humiliation. Her father, Charles, sat rooted to his chair, his jaw tight, his empire slipping through his fingers. And in the middle of it all stood Elena Brooks, calm, regal, her ruined gown a badge of resilience, her voice steady, her resolve unshakable. She held the microphone like a sword. For too long, she began, her words slicing through the thick tension. Women like Vivian have walked through rooms like these believing power belongs only to them because of their money, their privilege, their names. Her eyes swept over the crowd, locking on the stunned faces of CEOs, senators, journalists, and socialites. But power doesn't come from humiliation. It doesn't come from mocking someone because of the color of their skin. Real power, she paused, letting the silence deepen, comes from respect. Her words hung in the air, heavier than any chandelier. The crowd erupted in applause again, this time louder, bolder. People rose to their feet, not all, but enough to send a ripple of momentum through the room. Vivian clutched the edge of her table as if it might save her. "This is absurd," she shouted over the applause. "You're trying to ruin me. My family built this city. We don't need you, we never needed—" "Vivian," Charles's voice cracked like a whip. The single word shut her down instantly. He didn't even look at her. His gaze was locked on Elena. "Miss Brooks," he said, his tone measured but desperate. "Let us fix this. The deal can still go through. Whatever reparations you want, whatever public statement, it's yours. But don't destroy $4 billion of opportunity because of a single mistake." The word mistake sparked fire in Elena's eyes. She stepped forward, closer to him, and the cameras hidden among the guests zoomed in eagerly. "You call what happened here a mistake?" Her voice rose, echoing off the walls. "Your daughter degraded me. She degraded every woman of color watching this tonight. And you expect me to smile, sign papers, and pretend nothing happened?" Charles stiffened, his carefully constructed mask slipping. "Business is business," he growled. "Don't let your pride ruin something bigger than all of us." That was when Elena dropped her bombshell. "You think this deal is bigger than me?" she asked softly. Then her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Charles, you didn't do your homework." The crowd leaned in, curious, buzzing. "I don't need Lancaster Industries," she continued. "In fact, I came here tonight to give you an opportunity to prove you deserve to work with me. But what none of you know," she gestured to the cameras, the journalists, the live streamers in the room, "is that I already have a deal. A bigger one that makes this $4 billion look small." The ballroom gasped as one. Charles's face drained of color. He gripped the edge of the table like his daughter had before him. "You're lying," he spat, but Elena only tilted her head. "Am I?" She reached into her clutch and pulled out another folder. This one wasn't sleek black. It was crisp white, embossed with gold. She opened it, her eyes scanning the pages before lifting them to the stunned crowd. "This," she announced, holding it aloft, "is the finalized agreement between Brooks Global and the Sovereign Investment Authority. Valuation, $10 billion. Signed this morning." The room erupted. Journalists scrambled for their phones. Investors whispered furiously. Flashes went off as photographers captured the heiress's crumbling face, her father's rigid despair, and Elena's calm triumph. Vivienne let out a strangled cry. "No, that's not possible. You came here for our deal." "I came here," Elena cut in sharply, "to see if Lancaster Industries could rise to the moment. To see if you had the vision to walk beside me into the future. Instead," her gaze raked over Vivienne, frosting and diamonds clashing on her dress. "You proved exactly why your empire is crumbling." Applause thundered. Not scattered, not hesitant this time. Full-bodied, unanimous, roaring through the ballroom like a storm. Vivienne covered her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Charles sagged back into his chair, defeated. His empire wasn't dead, but tonight, before hundreds of witnesses, it had been humiliated. And Elena Brooks? She stood taller than ever, her ruined gown transformed by dignity into a gown of armor. She set the microphone down and turned to leave. But at the doorway, she paused and looked back one last time. "Power without respect," she said softly. "Is nothing." Then she walked out. The cameras followed her, the applause chasing her down the marble halls. And in her wake, the Lancasters sat broken, while the world hailed a new queen of business. The night after the gala, the world was no longer the same. News outlets replayed the moment endlessly. The splatter of cake, the stunned silence, Elena's unshakable poise as she turned humiliation into triumph. Every angle, every frame, every word was analyzed on talk shows, dissected in editorials, and shared millions of times across social media. Headlines screamed, "Black CEO shuts down 4B deal after racist attack." From cake to crown, Elena Brooks redefines power. Lancaster Empire in freefall after gala disaster. In the footage, Elena's calm declaration, "Power without respect is nothing," became a rallying cry. Young entrepreneurs printed it on shirts. Students painted it across murals. Activists quoted it in speeches. The world had watched one woman stand her ground in a room designed to exclude her. And she had left unbroken, even stronger. But for Elena, the impact wasn't measured in applause or headlines. She sat in her office the next morning, sunlight pouring through the tall glass windows, stacks of emails and messages flooding in. Her assistant, Maya, practically ran into the room, tablet in hand. "Requests for interviews, partnerships, endorsements. Elena, it's endless," Maya said breathlessly. And she paused, grinning. "Your speech? It's gone viral. 40 million views in 12 hours. Elena leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. She wasn't gloating, wasn't smiling with satisfaction. Her face carried something deeper, something heavier. "This isn't about views, Maya," she said quietly. "It's about responsibility. They're watching me now. Every move I make will matter, not just for me, but for every young black woman who thinks rooms like that aren't built for her." Maya's smile softened. "Then show them the rooms will change," Elena nodded. She already knew what came next. Across the city, the Lancaster family was unraveling. Vivian stayed locked in her penthouse suite, blinds drawn, her once bubbly social media pages gone silent. Her name, once synonymous with luxury, was now a meme, clips of cake smashing replayed under mocking captions. No apology she attempted felt sincere. No statement could undo what the world had seen. Charles Lancaster faced worse. Investors pulled out. Stock prices tumbled. Analysts declared that Lancaster Industries had been publicly dethroned. He had built his empire over decades, brick by brick, but one night of arrogance and one daughter's cruelty had shattered its foundation. And yet, in the quiet corners of that collapse, people whispered a truth no one dared say aloud. It wasn't just about the cake. It was about entitlement, about the refusal to believe power could belong to anyone outside their gilded circle. For Elena, that was the real victory, not destroying Lancaster Industries, but exposing what lay beneath it. Weeks later, Elena stood on a different stage, not a ballroom of elites, but a community center filled with young entrepreneurs, students, and dreamers. She wore no glittering gown, no jewels, no spotlight makeup. Just a simple suit, her natural confidence enough to light the room. "People ask me if I regret walking away from $4 billion, she began, smiling faintly. "And the answer is no. Because money can build towers, but respect builds legacies. And I'd rather leave behind a legacy than a tower built on silence." The audience erupted, not in polite applause, but in heartfelt cheers. Dozens of hands shot up, young women and men eager to ask, eager to learn, eager to follow in her footsteps. And in that moment, Elena realized something profound. The cake, the humiliation, the chaos of that night. It had never been about her alone. It was about everyone who had ever walked into a room and been told, silently or loudly, that they didn't belong. It was about rewriting the rules so the next generation didn't have to fight the same battles she had. Her voice softened as she ended her speech. "If they shut the door, build your own. If they laugh at you, let them. Because one day the same people who doubted you will have no choice but to watch you rise." The standing ovation lasted minutes. And for Elena, that sound was louder, more powerful, more meaningful than the applause of any gala. She had not just shut down a deal. She had opened a door. And somewhere in the quiet ruin of the Lancaster estate, Vivian and Charles finally understood. The world had changed, and they were no longer at its center. Elena Brooks was.